Today I want to tell you a tragic story that shocked all of Russia back in 2018. It's the story of how two smart, talented young people with their whole lives ahead of them ended up at a point where there was no way out. On January 22nd, 2018, in a rented apartment on Iskhakov Street in central Moscow, police found two bodies. Artyom and Tanya were only 19 years old. The circumstances of this horrific tragedy are still heavily debated. Without exaggeration, millions of people followed and discussed this case, trying to make sense of what happened. And there was a lot to dig into. The killer kept a very detailed diary, where he described everything going on in his mental state, including graphic details of the crime itself. After killing Tanya, Artyom left a note that later became public. And that note made many people see the killer as a victim. Hundreds of groups and public pages appeared on social media, where people analyzed every detail of the case. Some became completely obsessed with this story. Some mourned the victim. Others tried to justify the one who killed her. What's truly frightening is the thought that this tragedy might have been prevented. There were so many warning signs, so many red flags, but no one paid attention to them. Or maybe they just didn't want to. There are two reasons why it's important for me to talk about this story. First, many of you may have gone through emotional states similar to what those two young people experienced at the very beginning of their adult lives. This story is a clear example of what obsession with another person can lead to, and what can happen to the object of that obsession when the signs of affection are constantly ignored. Second, I hope that this story can help people recognize and prevent similar tragedies in the future. So let's start from the very beginning. Tanya Strakhova was born in December 1889 in Kharlov. Later, her family moved to a small town on the outskirts of Moscow. Tanya was an only child, and her parents absolutely adored her. After finishing 9th grade, she passed all her exams and graduated from school early with a gold medal. In Russia, school usually lasts 11 years. Right after that, Tanya enrolled in the Higher School of Economics, one of the top universities in the country, majoring in communications, media, and design. By January 2018, she was already in her third year of college, and only 19 years old. After the tragedy, a former classmate told journalists that Tanya was incredibly smart, very social, kind, and even altruistic. She traveled a lot: Paris, Portugal, St. Petersburg. She went to concerts, parties, meet new people. She loved drafting and drawing. She was learning Czech and dreamed of moving to Prague and study architecture. A true humanities person. At one point, she entered into a fake marriage with a tattoo artist from St. Petersburg. They never lived together, and no one really knows why she did it. From the outside, everything looked perfect. A beautiful, smart, active girl with endless plans for the future. But in the 2017, Tanya started a private diary on social media. And there she wrote something very different. For several years now, life has felt unbearable. Depression, emptiness, and sense of meaninglessness. Only a few people knew about this side of her life. Artyom Iskhakov was born in May 1889 in Moscow, and his story was very different from Tanya's. His family lived in a 4-room apartment on Zemlyanov Val, right in the heart of Moscow. His parents worked in the banking sector, a well-off, educated family with 3 children. Artyom had an older brother, Timur, and a younger sister, Leah. He was the middle child. His mother often posted photos of her children on social media. It was clear she was proud of them. Later acquaintances told journalists, an exemplary family. The parents did everything they could to raise their kids properly. Artyom also finished school early, but unlike Tanya, he leaned more toward science and math. He competed in programming Olympiads and was drawn to technical subjects. He got into Bauman Moscow State Technical University, majoring in computer science and control systems. At the same time, he got a job as a programmer, coding in Java, earning around $900 a month. In 19, classmates later described him as a good, kind guy. He loved music, wrote poetry. He really felt other people, those who knew him said. But there was another perspective. One friend told journalists that Artyom hadn't fully formed as a person and had started living independently too early. In the year leading up to the tragedy, Artyom changed. He started drinking heavily, experienced with light drugs, and almost stopped showing up at the university. He began seeing a psychiatrist and started taking antidepressants. Something inside him was breaking, but from the outside, it was barely noticeable. Two students from completely different worlds. She from a regular family near Moscow, where there wasn't enough money to renovate her room. He from a wealthy Moscow family with an apartment in the city center. Both graduated school early. Both were 19. Both had big plans. Prague, career, a future. Artyom and Tanya first met in the summer 2015. It was brief and nothing really came of it. They didn't truly connect until a few months later, in October, when they met again at a nightclub. In his diary, Artyom described that night like this. I was at a party, walking around, trying to find a girl to hook up with. Everyone kept brushing me off. Then I ran into Tanya. She said her wallet and phone had been stolen and asked me to help look for them. I told her to get lost. Lol. Later that night, closer to morning, I saw her again. I walked up and said, "So, wanna kiss?" And we did. God, the way she kissed. I'll never forget the taste of that Orbic gum on her lips. We waited for the party to end, went to McDonald's, kissed again, took the metro, said goodbye, started walking away, and then we both turned around at the same time. After that night, they started seeing each other all the time. They went on long walks, talked for hours, stayed all day at each other's places. Artyom later wrote in his diary, "Once we ended up at Empty Cafe, just sitting there and talking. At some point I said, 'Tanya, I think I'm in love with you.' She replied, 'You know what? Me too.' That fall, they were practically inseparable. But then something happened that Artyom never expected. About a week before New Year's Eve, Tanya told him that she was attracted not only to men, but to women as well. She immediately added that this didn't interfere with their relationship. Artyom wrote about it like this. I didn't care because I was already too in love. We celebrated New Year's, the three of us, at my place. From that moment on, their relationship started to deteriorate quickly. Trying to please Tanya in every possible way, Artyom quickly became predictable and boring to her. He focused on this a lot in his diary. She said she was bored, that we had nothing to talk about. We decided to see each other once or twice a week instead of every day. Everything was fine until my best friend invited her to one of our mutual parties. Tanya started talking to my friend there, and we got into a fight. That friend ended up pulling her into our group. The friend's name was Dmitry. According to people who was there, Tanya showed obvious signs of interest in Dmitry, right in front of Artyom's friends. Artyom couldn't handle it, and conflict broke out. Before this, Artyom and Tanya had always spent time alone, just the two of them. Now Dmitry brought Tanya into Artyom's close circle of friends. After that incident, they invited him out less and less, especially to parties where Dmitry usually invited Tanya. From here on, the story becomes even more confusing and disturbing. Both Artyom and Tanya were very young, just 19 years old, and didn't fully understand what was happening between them, or what kind of consequences it could eventually lead to. At some point, Tanya wanted to distance herself from Artyom, but for some reason, she couldn't. Artyom described it this way in his diary. She texted me saying we needed to take a break, that the feelings were still there, but the desire to continue this kind of relationship wasn't. She said she was tired of everything. But a couple of hours later, she messaged me again, saying she had looked through our photos and realized she wasn't ready to let all of this go yet. The next day, she came over to my place. That was the moment when they could have walked away, but their feelings were still there, or at least it seemed that way, and they couldn't let each other go. Though, to be precise, Tanya still had feelings, while Artyom was deeply in love with her, and would remain that way until the very end. In May 2016, Artyom wrote in his diary, a week before the May holidays, we all went to a party together. Tanya got annoyed with my behavior, said I was being too clingy. I was feeling down while everyone else was drunk and having a great time. In the end, I got drunk too, and then I felt fine as well. On May 9th, 2016, the group got together again. Artyom kissed Tanya goodbye. In his diary, he wrote that he liked it. Tanya, however, texted a friend saying the kiss felt unpleasant and that she felt violated. From that message alone, it was already clear that Tanya most likely no longer had any feelings for Artyom. From this point on, the situation began to take on a darker and more disturbing tone. In his diary, Artyom described how their relationship was falling apart right in front of him. Recently, we ran into each other again. I drank a lot, and everyone was annoyed by my behavior. Tanya said it disgusted her even to look at me. I got completely drunk, sat in the kitchen, and cried. I felt awful. I tried not to text her, but I kept breaking down and doing it anyway. Hope was still there. A couple of times we even talked normally, and I thought, that's it. Everything will go back to how it was. I was wrong. In my own friend group, I was basically told to get lost, and she stayed with them. That's how it went. She stayed with them, with his friends, including Dmitri, the same guy they thought over before. At some point, despite everything, they ended up living in the same apartment again. Wanting to move out from her parents' place and start living independently, Tanya rented an apartment on a Iskhakov street. At first, she lived there with some guy, then with a female friend. During that period, she and Artyom barely saw each other, only occasionally at shared parties. But eventually Tanya's roommates moved out, and she couldn't afford the rent on her own. And for reasons that are still hard to understand, out of all possible options, she chose Artyom as her new roommate. After the tragedy, one of Artyom's friends told journalists he became her slave. When they lived together, he waited for her every night while she went out partying. He asked her not to post explicit photos on her private Instagram. Tanya replied, "Your opinion means nothing to me." There was nothing between them anymore, but she couldn't or wouldn't let him go either. By that time, Artyom has already working at an IT company and earning good money. Maybe that was the reason, or maybe she simply didn't want to live with a stranger. Either way, she chose Artyom. Of course he agreed, without realizing what kind of torment he was signing himself up for. For 2 years they lived together as roommates. For Tanya, everything had been over for a long time. For Artyom, it hadn't. Tanya treated Artyom like a friend and told him everything about her personal life. In the evenings, they would sit in the kitchen for hours, talking. But their relationship never went beyond that during all the time they lived together. Artyom, meanwhile, constantly felt powerless, unable to change the situation, unable to walk away. In his personal diary he wrote, "I've kind of lost my mind. I lie in the bed for hours, seeing something like lucid dreams about her." A friend recalled seeing him once on his knees, screaming up at the sky, "God, why is she so stupid?" In summer 2017, Artyom wrote in his diary that a fear had taken hold of him. The fear that he would never again experience a feeling like the love he had for Tanya. Artyom wrote that caring for Tanya had become the meaning of his life. By December 2017, Tanya had already started openly dating Dmitri, the same Dmitri they had fought over back in 2016. The same guy who had pulled her into Artyom's social circle. The one who had taken Artyom's place among his friends, while Artyom stayed at home and waited. Now Dmitri was coming to their apartment, drinking with Tanya, and Artyom was watching. On December 7th, 2017, Artyom wrote in his diary, "Yesterday Dmitri came over. We were all drinking together. Then he and Tanya decided to go out for beer. They didn't want to take me with them, but they had kissed that Saturday, and I didn't want to leave them alone. When they got back, Dmitri sat Artyom and Tanya down in the kitchen and told them to finally sort out their relationship once and for all. Tanya said she didn't see Artyom as a boyfriend, but that he was important for her, and she didn't want to hurt him. She said the only solution was for them to move out and live separately, so they wouldn't keep causing each other pain." Another argument followed. They decided to move out, and once again, they didn't. Tanya's parents didn't have money to renovate her room, so she couldn't move back home until summer. On January 10th, 2018, Tanya texted a friend and asked her to come over urgently. According to Tanya, Artyom had become aggressive and behaved inappropriately. Artyom couldn't let her go. He even went on a couple of dates with girls from Tinder, but it didn't erase the pain. On January 17th, he wrote in his diary, "Today I went for a walk with a girl from Tinder, walked her home, kissed her. I feel a bit better, but I had this feeling that I'll snap again and fall back into my suffering. I knew from the very beginning what kind of person she was. I believed something in her would change. But no, I love you, but I can't take this anymore. It's already almost hell. So, I'm sorry." From the first days of January, terrifying thoughts began to appear in Artyom's mind, and they quickly took over his consciousness. This is how he described it himself in his notes. "I got tired of listening to her explaining about why she doesn't want to drink with me, and watching her flirt with my friend. It's unbearable to see how great they get along, and to realize that I'm just too different for her to ever have anything even remotely similar with me." I had been carrying this idea since the beginning of January, vividly imagining in my head how it would happen. I think by now you can already guess what he was talking about. 6 months earlier he had bought a rope for Shibari. They had been lying there, waiting for their moment. On the evening of January 22nd, Tanya went out to walk Dmitry home. Artyom stayed in the apartment. He waited. She returned around 4 in the morning. Artyom heard footsteps in the hallway, followed her into the room, and attacked her. He later wrote, "She asked me to leave. I didn't. I started choking her." Tanya lost consciousness, but she was still alive. Then he had sexual intercourse with her. After that, Artyom set down at his computer and began writing, in detail, about everything he had done. He wrote for hours. He described his actions, tried to explain them, and asked for forgiveness from Tanya's parents, from his own parents, from his colleagues, and from his psychiatrist. About his psychiatrist he wrote, "I don't understand why you ignored my last messages, but it doesn't matter. Thank you for giving me the psychologist's contact and prescribing medication. It helped ease my life, at least a little." To Tanya's parents he wrote, "Please forgive me for taking away your only child. I loved her deeply, but Tanya was too much herself, and that's why everything turned out this way." Afterward he ate, returned to the room where Tanya's body lay, had sexual intercourse with her again, and went to sleep. When he woke up in the morning, he reread what he had written the night before, and added several more paragraphs. In these final notes, the realization of what he had done began to sink in. "You know," Artyom wrote, "at this exact moment I've realized what I've done. I feel cold. My hands are shaking even more. My God, to violate a dead body, killing a person is easy. Understanding it is not." Gradually Artyom began thinking about ending his own life. In his final note he wrote, "I don't really want to die, because there are still so many things you can do in this life. But the situation is such that I'm almost certainly going to prison. And even if I avoid it, I'll end up in psychiatric hospital, which is even worse nightmare." He scheduled his final note to be published on social media at midnight between January 22nd and 23rd. He carved the word hate into his left arm. He swallowed pills, washed them down with alcohol, then took another rope and hung himself in the kitchen. Nearby was a photograph of Polyjakin, a friend who had taken his own life earlier. Tanya was buried on January 26 at Zakharovsky Cemetery. Her friends, classmates, and acquaintances came to say goodbye. Artyom was buried the next day, January 27, in the Muslim section of Domodedovo Cemetery. Only his relatives attended: his parents, his older brother, and his younger sister. On February 1st, a spontaneous memorial appeared near the building on Kazakova Street, where Tanya and Artyom had lived. Tanya's friends brought flowers, candles, photographs, toys, and hung them on the tree. On a nearby tree, someone hung a photo of Artyom with the caption, "A sunny guy." The photo was torn down the next day. People kept coming to Tanya's tree. They brought flowers. No one came to Artyom's. At the university where Tanya studied, her portrait was displayed along with an obituary. At Artyom's university, no one mentioned him. On social media, memorial groups dedicated to this tragedy began to appear. Dozens at first, then hundreds. People collected photos, messages, screenshots. They discussed what music Artyom and Tanya listened to, what candy they liked, how they dressed. Journalists spoke with members of these groups. One girl said, "I've probably become some kind of psycho. I can't help myself. I keep thinking about them. I just want to crawl inside their thoughts, their heads, their souls, and answer the eternal question, why?" Another participant explained it this way: Artyom wanted love, higher feelings from her. She didn't need that, but I don't blame her. Most of the fans sympathized with Artyom. They described him as a fragile, sensitive, and talented poet. Tanya, on the other hand, was often portrayed as cold, insincere, and promiscuous. Among Artyom's circle of friends, there was what some later called a suicide club. 2 years earlier, 5 people around his age had taken their own lives. One of them, nicknamed the Red Samurai, stabbed his own girlfriend in 2016 and then killed himself. In his final note, Artyom mentioned the friends he believed he was joining. "Austin, Vasily, I'm coming to you, my dear friends." Millions of people read this story. His final note, in full or in fragments, was seen by almost everyone who was between 15 and 25 years old at the time. Some saw it as a story about unrequited love and madness. others about victim blaming and women's right to be free, some about a broken mental health, others about a toxic relationship that neither of them was able to escape.